This moment is not random, and it is not traumatic either. At 6:16, nothing external needs to happen for something meaningful to occur. There is no message arriving, no signal demanding response, no event that asks you to interpret it. What happens instead is far quieter, and because of that, far more stable. Certain moments carry emotional rhythm, not because time itself is magical, but because human memory and nervous systems store meaning in patterns. When two people once shared emotional presence, that presence does not disappear when contact ends. It settles, and sometimes it surfaces briefly, without effort, without longing, without instruction. At 6:16, the angels describe a moment of synchronized remembrance. This does not mean obsession. It does not mean regret. It does not mean unfinished business calling for action. It means that a shared emotional imprint becomes briefly visible in awareness on both sides, like a thought passing through light and continuing on its way. You may feel it first, not because you are missing something, but because you are open. Openness does not mean vulnerability in the sense of weakness. It means you are not cluttered with constant mental noise. When the inner space is clear, subtle things can be noticed without amplifying them. This is important. The moment does not ask you to do anything. It does not invite you to reach out, wait, interpret, or assign meaning beyond acknowledgement. The healthiest connections do not demand action to prove their reality. They simply exist, briefly recognized, then released. The person you miss does not think of you with urgency at this time. They do not spiral into longing. They do not replay scenarios. The angels describe it as a pause. A neutral, grounded pause where clarity replaces emotion for a second. A thought without attachment. A recognition without desire. This distinction matters because it keeps you centered. Emotional dependence pulls energy outward. This moment does the opposite. It confirms that the connection had meaning without asking you to relive it. Meaning does not require continuation to be real. Time plays a role here, but not as prediction. The nervous system responds to rhythm. Certain moments feel familiar because the body remembers how it once felt in similar emotional states. When two people shared regulation, safety, or understanding, that imprint can resurface simultaneously without intention. This is not mystical thinking. It is how emotional memory works when it is not distorted by fear. The angels emphasize this because fear turns resonance into fixation. Calm allows resonance to pass through cleanly. You are not being tested. You are not being chosen. You are not being pulled backward. This moment does not say that something must return or be resolved. It simply acknowledges that something real existed, and that acknowledgement no longer destabilizes you. Notice how this feels. It does not tighten your chest. It does not speed your thoughts. It does not create urgency. That is how you know it is healthy. Healthy emotional recognition does not hijack attention. It integrates quietly. The angels also point out what this moment is not. It is not a signal to wait. It is not a sign to act. It is not confirmation that something will happen. It is not asking you to check the clock repeatedly or assign meaning to future moments. It arrives once, cleanly, and passes. When 6:16 moves on, nothing ends and nothing begins. The world does not change. Your day continues, but something softens. A subtle internal tension releases. That release is the entire point. Some connections remain meaningful without needing to be active. That does not diminish them. It honors them. Not everything meaningful is meant to be carried forward. Some things are meant to be placed gently into memory, where they no longer ask for energy. This moment helps you do that without force, without denial, without dramatizing the past or idealizing it. Just acknowledgement, then return. You may notice that after this moment, you feel more grounded rather than distracted, more present rather than pulled inward. That is the sign that the connection has found its correct place inside you. The angels describe this as dignity. Emotional dignity is the ability to recognize connection without losing center, to feel without being moved off balance, to remember without reopening wounds. This is why the moment is brief. If it lingered, it would become something else. Its brevity is what keeps it clean. You do not need to prepare for 6:16. You do not need to watch the clock. If you notice it, you notice it. If you do not, nothing is lost. The meaning does not depend on attention. It depends on readiness. And readiness, in this case, means you are no longer using connection to define yourself. That is why this message reaches you now. Not because the bond is pulling you back, but because it no longer can. At 6:16, the remembrance passes through without disturbance. That is not coincidence. That is resolution expressing itself quietly. And once it passes, you remain where you are, centered, whole, free to continue your day without carrying anything extra. That is the entire message. Nothing more is required. What happens next is subtle, and because it is subtle, it is often misunderstood. After the moment of synchronized remembrance, the mind may try to assign meaning backward. It may ask whether this indicates a future reconnection, an unfinished conversation, or a sign that something should be revived. The angels are clear here. This moment is not about direction. It is about placement. Shared emotional memory does not exist to pull people back together. It exists to resolve how the past lives inside the present. When a connection has not been fully integrated, it appears as longing or fixation. When it has been integrated, it appears briefly as recognition and then releases. This is why the timing feels specific but not demanding. The nervous system recognizes patterns, not prophecies. Certain emotional states were once experienced together, and the body remembers those states as rhythms rather than stories. When the rhythm reappears, awareness touches it for a second and then moves on. You may notice that the memory does not come with images or dialogue. It is not cinematic. It is more like a feeling of familiarity without content. That is a sign that the memory has been processed at a deeper level. It no longer needs narrative to justify its existence. This is where many people get confused. They assume that if something resurfaces, it must want something. But not all resurfacing is a request. Sometimes it is simply a system checking that a file has been correctly stored. The angels describe this as emotional closure without confrontation. No conversation is needed. No explanation is required. The recognition itself completes the process. If you pay attention, you will see that this moment does not change your behavior. You do not feel compelled to reach out. You do not feel the urge to wait. You do not feel restless. Instead, there is a small internal confirmation that says, "This was real, and it no longer controls me." That confirmation is the actual shift. This is why you feel it first. Not because you are more invested, but because you are more available. Availability here does not mean openness to another person. It means openness to your own internal signals without turning them into action. People who are emotionally overloaded often miss these moments entirely. Their systems are too busy reacting. Calm is what allows resonance to pass through without distortion. The angels emphasize that this moment respects your autonomy. It does not ask for interpretation. It does not punish you if you miss it. It does not escalate if you ignore it. It simply exists as a brief alignment and then dissolves. That dissolution is important. It prevents the mind from attaching meaning that does not belong there. Attachment is what turns memory into longing. This moment avoids that by being short, clean, and non-repeating. You might notice that after this, your emotional posture shifts slightly. You feel less pulled toward the past and more settled in the present. Not because the past lost value, but because it no longer competes for attention. This is how healthy emotional systems work. They allow acknowledgement without rehearsal. They allow feeling without repetition. The angels also clarify something crucial. This moment does not say that the other person is thinking of you in the same way you think of them. It says that both of you briefly access the same emotional imprint, but from different lives, different contexts, different levels of awareness. That distinction protects you from projection. Projection creates stories. Stories create expectation. Expectation creates disappointment. This moment bypasses all of that by staying nonverbal. It is also why this is not a sign to track time or look for patterns. Patterns emerge naturally when something is unresolved. When something is resolved, it does not need reinforcement. If you find yourself wanting to check the clock again tomorrow, that impulse is not part of the message. It is the mind attempting to regain control over something that was never meant to be controlled. The healthiest response is neutrality. Acknowledge the moment and let it pass. That neutrality is not indifference. It is emotional maturity. As this settles, you may realize that the connection now feels lighter, not erased, not dismissed, just properly scaled. It fits inside your life rather than sitting in front of it. This is the difference between memory and attachment. Memory informs. Attachment directs. This moment belongs to memory. The angels describe this phase as internal rebalancing. The emotional weight redistributes. What once leaned forward now settles back. Balance returns without effort. You do not need to do anything with this understanding. Doing would imply that something is unfinished. Nothing here is unfinished. The moment has already done what it came to do by passing cleanly. And as it does, your attention returns naturally to where you are. Not because you are distracted, but because you are complete enough to stay present. That is the true significance of this experience. It does not pull you backward. It confirms that you are no longer being pulled at all. And from that steadier place, the day continues without residue. At this stage, the meaning of the moment shifts away from the other person entirely. What matters now is not that they thought of you, but that asterisk, you are able to notice the moment without losing yourself inside it, asterisk. That is the real signal the angels point to. When connection is unresolved, awareness collapses into reaction. Thoughts spiral. Emotions intensify. The body tightens. None of that happened here. Instead, you remain steady. You observe the feeling rather than being carried by it. That difference is everything. This shows that the connection no longer defines your center. It exists, but it does not steer you. Emotional maturity looks like this: the ability to feel resonance without turning it into meaning that demands action. The angels describe this as inner containment, not suppression, not distance. Containment means emotions are held by the self rather than leaking outward in search of validation. You did not need the moment to lead anywhere. That tells you it has already completed its role. Many people confuse intensity with depth, but depth is often quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not insist on being revisited. It simply rests where it belongs. This is why the remembrance did not last long. Healthy emotional processing does not repeat itself endlessly. Repetition is a sign of unresolved attachment. Resolution shows up as brevity. You may notice that after the moment passed, you did not feel compelled to analyze it further. Curiosity did not turn into fixation. That is another marker of integration. When something is understood at a deeper level, the mind does not need to keep working on it. The angels emphasize that this experience is not about longing being returned. It is about dignity being restored. Dignity is the ability to acknowledge connection without bargaining for more. This moment confirms that the bond has moved from your emotional foreground into your emotional background. It is still part of you, but it no longer competes with your present life for attention. You might realize that the thought of them no longer carries urgency. There is no pull to resolve, no pressure to interpret, no sense that something is unfinished. That neutrality is not emptiness. It is balance. Balance allows you to move forward without severing the past violently. Nothing had to be erased for this to happen. Nothing had to be rejected. It simply found its proper scale. The angels describe this as emotional sovereignty. You are no longer governed by echoes. You are informed by them, but not directed by them. This is why the experience feels grounding rather than destabilizing. Grounding experiences return you to yourself. Destabilizing ones pull you outward. If the connection had been calling for action, your body would have reacted differently. There would have been agitation, restlessness, or urgency. Instead, there was calm acknowledgement followed by release. That release is not something you forced. It happened naturally because the system no longer needed to hold tension around the memory. Tension only exists when something is unresolved. You may find that your perception of the past shifts subtly after this. Not rewritten, not idealized, simply placed. The past becomes a chapter rather than a question. This placement allows your present to breathe. You do not have to defend your forward movement. You do not have to justify your independence. It is already embodied. The angels are clear. This moment is not meant to repeat. It does not need reinforcement. When something has found its place, it stops knocking. If you feel calm reading this, that calm is not coincidence. Calm is how alignment feels when it is no longer fighting itself. Nothing is being taken away from you here. Something is being returned. Your center. And from that center, you can relate to memory without being ruled by it. That is the quiet transformation happening now. The moment did not open a door. It closed a loop. And loops, when closed gently, free energy for what comes next. The moment completes itself by leaving no residue. After it passes, there is no pull to revisit it, no urge to replay it, no sense that something was left unfinished. That absence of residue is how you know it was whole. Healthy emotional experiences do not demand storage space. They integrate and move on. What remains is not the feeling itself, but a slight recalibration in how you stand inside yourself. You are not different in a dramatic way. You are steadier in a practical one. You may notice that you do not feel the need to protect this moment or explain it to anyone. It does not need witnesses. It does not need interpretation. What is real does not require reinforcement. The angels describe this phase as completion through neutrality. Neutrality here does not mean indifference. It means the emotional charge has resolved. The memory exists without voltage. This is why the moment does not repeat. Repetition would indicate unfinished processing. Silence indicates closure. When something has been acknowledged fully, it stops asking for attention. From here, the connection no longer sits in front of your life. It sits behind you, like a supporting structure that does not need to be seen to function. It has done its work. You are free to move forward without denying what mattered. Forward movement does not require erasure. It requires proportion. This moment restored proportion. If you think of the person again later, it will feel different, lighter, less charged, more like recognition than reaction. That shift is not accidental. It is the effect of integration. The angels emphasize that this experience was not about the other person returning to your awareness. It was about you returning to yourself with more balance than before. Balance does not announce itself. It simply allows life to continue without friction. Decisions feel cleaner. Attention feels less split. Energy feels better conserved. There is nothing to do with this understanding. Doing would imply that something remains unresolved. Nothing does. You do not need to wait for another time marker. You do not need to check for signs. You do not need to track emotional patterns. Those behaviors belong to uncertainty, not clarity. This moment gave you clarity without instruction. That is the most respectful form of guidance. The angels describe this as dignity restored to connection. Dignity allows you to honor what was real without letting it dictate what is next. You are not meant to hold on to this experience. Letting it go is not loss. It is proof that it integrated properly. As your day continues, you may forget the exact time. That is expected. The body remembers what matters. The mind does not need to. What stays is a subtle sense of being less pulled by the past and more present where you are. That presence is the true outcome. Nothing is missing. Nothing needs to return. Nothing needs to be explained. The moment did not open a chapter. It closed one cleanly. And because it closed cleanly, it leaves space for whatever comes next to arrive without interference. That is how you know this was not coincidence. It was resolution moving through quietly. And now you are free to continue your day without carrying anything extra.